Ms. Ellis, Crockett said evenly. You've testified that your involvement in the post-election legal efforts was purely procedural. Is that correct? The room was already silent before she finished the sentence. It was the kind of silence that has weight to it, the kind that makes air feel heavy. That's correct, Ellis said, her voice calm but quick. Too quick. Crockett didn't look down. She didn't shuffle papers. She just stared at her. The kind of stare that strips confidence off layer by layer. You also told this committee, Crockett continued, that you were unaware of any attempts to pressure state officials into altering certified election results. Yes, Ellis said. That's correct. Good, Crockett said softly. Then we agree on at least one thing. She opened her binder, not fast, not slow, like someone already knew what she would find inside. On December 3rd, at 8:41 p.m., she said, you placed a call to the office of a state elections director. Do you deny that? I don't recall that specific call, Ellis said. Crockett nodded once, slow, deliberate. You don't recall, she repeated. Then let's refresh your memory. She lifted a transcript. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. If they won't change the certification, we'll make them wish they had. It's not illegal to remind them who signs their funding. Every word landed like a tap on glass, soft, but dangerous. That's your voice, Ms. Ellis, Crockett said. Isn't it? Ellis shifted. That's completely out of context, she said. That was metaphorical. Advocacy, not a threat. Metaphorical? Crockett asked. You called an elections director and spoke about funding. What exactly was the metaphor there? A few reporters in the back glanced up from their laptops. Someone's pen stopped moving. Crockett didn't push further. She didn't have to. She just turned the page. Let's move on, she said. You've testified that you received no outside compensation for your role after the election. That remains your testimony. Yes, Ellis said firmly. Crockett slid a printed page toward the clerk. Then please explain this wire transfer, $145,000, December 11th, from Liberty Strategic Partners. The account bears your signature. Ellis's breath caught, barely audible, but the microphone caught it anyway. That's fabricated, she said. So your bank fabricated your signature? Crockett asked. I can't confirm that document. Crockett smiled, not kindly, but cleanly. Of course, she said. We'll get it authenticated. But the routing lines match an entity you worked with for. How long was it? For months. Ellis stayed silent. And according to your own filing, Crockett continued, you classified that payment as a legal retainer for a case that never existed. A murmur rippled through the room. The chairman tapped the gavel once, just to remind everyone this was still a hearing, not a trial. Crockett leaned forward, elbows on the table. Ms. Ellis, I want to make sure I understand, she said quietly. You didn't receive money for legal work, but you signed off on a six-figure retainer from a political PAC's proxy account? Ellis exhaled through her nose, steadying herself. Congresswoman, this is a smear. That was a reimbursement for travel. Travel to where? Crockett asked. Delaware? Because that's where the LLC is based. No public records show any hearings there. Ellis tried to interrupt. Crockett didn't let her. You see, Crockett said softly, it's not the amount that matters. It's the intent. Money moves for a reason. And in this case, the reason seems to match your statements on private messaging apps. She opened another folder. In this signal thread, she said, you wrote, and I quote, if we lean hard on certifications, they'll crack. Funding leverage moves mountains. Did you write that? Ellis's throat tightened. That's out of context, she said again. Crockett nodded slowly. It always is, she said. Out of context. Out of memory. Out of accountability. The audience didn't breathe. Crockett straightened the papers in front of her, aligning them perfectly. You told the country you were fighting for democracy, she said. But every document I've read suggests you were fighting for control. That's your interpretation? Ellis said, voice rising slightly. Crockett's tone didn't move. It's the record, she said. Ellis crossed her arms. This is a political ambush. No, Crockett said. It's a mirror. That word hit harder than a shout. Jenna Ellis took a long breath before speaking. Her hands, still folded, trembled once, barely noticeable to the cameras, but not to Jasmine Crockett. Crockett saw everything. "Congresswoman," Ellis said, her voice tightening. "I understand the need for oversight, but what you're doing here, this is not about truth. This is about optics. It's theater." Crockett tilted her head slightly. "Is that your defense?" she said quietly. "That it looks too convincing to be true?" "I'm saying," Ellis continued, "you're trying to criminalize political disagreement. That's dangerous." Crockett didn't respond. Not immediately. She just let the silence fill the space, slow, thick, deliberate. It forced Ellis to keep talking, to fill it. "I've been targeted for years," Ellis said, "because I stood for something unpopular. Because I refused to bend to political pressure." Crockett's voice came low. "Political pressure," she repeated. "You mean the kind you applied to state officials? Or the kind you used to fundraise off fear?" "That's a distortion," Ellis said sharply. Crockett didn't move. "Then clarify it for us." "I was doing my job," Ellis said, "representing clients, advocating legal theories. And when those theories failed," Crockett asked, "did you stop advocating them?" Ellis hesitated. "I pursued all legal remedies available, even the ones that didn't exist," Crockett said. A low murmur passed through the gallery again. The chairman didn't gavel this time. He just stared straight ahead, his jaw set. Crockett opened her binder again, slowly. The microphone picked up the scrape of the rings. "Let's talk about this memo," she said. "Dated November 21st. From your own office. It warns that continuing to pursue unfounded claims could result in sanctions." Ellis blinked. "I remember internal discussions," she said. "But not that specific memo." Crockett nodded once. "Of course you don't. It's marked urgent. Signed by 2 co-counsel. It reads, and I quote, 'Further filings risk loss of bar license due to lack of evidence.'" Crockett looked up. "Did you read that memo, Ms. Ellis?" "I read many memos," Ellis said carefully. "You read this one," Crockett said. "Because you replied, 'Understood.' Proceed, anyway." The room froze. For one full second, nobody breathed. Then Crockett placed the memo flat on the desk. "Would you like to explain what was so urgent that it justified risking your law license?" "I was under immense pressure," Ellis said. "The country was divided. The media was twisting everything. So you decided to twist it back," Crockett said quietly. "That's not fair," Ellis said. Crockett leaned forward. "Fairness isn't the question. Truth is." Ellis's voice broke slightly. "I did what I thought was right." Crockett didn't blink. "And if it wasn't?" Ellis looked away. That was the moment the cameras caught, the half-second when Jenna Ellis realized this wasn't about politics anymore. It was about credibility. And hers was evaporating. Crockett turned one final page. "Ms. Ellis," she said, "you've built your reputation on defending the law. But at some point, you stopped practicing law and started performing it. And performance doesn't hold up under oath." "I reject that characterization," Ellis said, trying to steady herself. "You're grandstanding for cameras." Crockett's reply was soft, almost sympathetic. "If the truth feels like theater," she said, "maybe that's because you've spent too long on stage." Ellis sat back. Her posture was perfect again. But her voice, that calm, professional tone she'd trained for years, was gone. "I've been accused of a lot," she said, "but never of lying for profit. That's a smear." Crockett raised her eyes. "You were paid to argue what you knew wasn't true," she said. "If that's not profit, what is it?" "That's not how this works," Ellis snapped. Crockett didn't move. "No," she said quietly. "That's not how justice works." The tension thickened until even the hum of the lights seemed to fade. Crockett leaned closer. "You want to make this political, Ms. Ellis? Fine. But when the truth is on the record, politics stops being a shield. It becomes evidence." Ellis stayed silent. And in that silence, the nation watching, the cameras fixed, Jasmine Crockett did what only the best cross-examiners know how to do. She said nothing, because nothing was louder. Crockett didn't move right away. She let the tension linger, that rare, electric silence that feels like the air itself is listening. Then she turned the page. "Ms. Ellis," she said quietly, "I want to shift from the public record to the private one." Ellis stiffened. "Private?" she asked. "Yes," Crockett said. "Your private correspondence." She placed a new folder on the table. "Thick. cream-colored, its edges slightly worn, as if it had been handled too many times by too many careful hands. These, Crockett continued, are excerpts from your communications with senior officials between November and January, acquired legally through subpoena. Ellis's jaw tightened. I'm aware of my own communications, she said. Crockett nodded. Then this won't surprise you. She opened the folder. In an email dated December 10th, Crockett began. You wrote, and I quote, "The evidence doesn't hold, but we can keep the base engaged by focusing on doubt itself." Ellis blinked hard. That's out of context, she said again, the words brittle this time, rehearsed. Out of context, Crockett repeated. You keep saying that. But context is everything. Context is how we separate strategy from deception. Crockett flipped another page. 2 days later, you sent another email, subject line talking points. It says, truth isn't the priority right now. Timing is. A single cough echoed from somewhere in the audience. No one else moved. Do you deny writing that? Crockett asked. Ellis hesitated, searching for words. Those were draft notes, she said finally. Internal brainstorming. Not directives. Drafts, Crockett said quietly, become doctrine when they're followed. Ellis shook her head. That's unfair. Every team debates language. It doesn't mean I endorsed manipulation. Crockett's gaze sharpened. Then what did you endorse? Because every document I've seen, every single one, shows that when the facts weakened, your language hardened. She paused, letting that line sit like a blade on the table between them. When evidence disappeared, Crockett said, you didn't retreat. You amplified. You didn't step back from the edge. You built a podium on it. Ellis swallowed. I was following legal guidance. Whose? Crockett asked. Ellis hesitated. Whose guidance told you? Crockett continued. To publicly discredit judges after they ruled against you. Whose guidance told you to imply criminal intent where none existed? Whose guidance told you to label elected officials as traitors? Ellis's lips parted, but no words came. Crockett pressed on. You see, Ms. Ellis, she said, lawyers are allowed to be wrong. They're allowed to lose. But they're not allowed to lie. The gallery stirred again. That quiet shuffle of realization when the point lands too cleanly to argue with. Crockett turned to the next document. This one's different, she said. It's handwritten. Ellis's head lifted just slightly. Crockett held up the letter, a photocopy, but the loops of ink were unmistakably personal. This note was written on January 7th, she said, one day after the Capitol attack. You wrote, I didn't think it would go this far. But we can still control the narrative if we move fast. The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy, undeniable. Is that your handwriting, Ms. Ellis? Ellis stared down. I don't remember writing that. Maybe because you didn't expect to ever see it again, Crockett said. But paper remembers. Crockett set the letter down and straightened her posture. Her tone didn't rise, but it changed, firmer now, colder. You're a lawyer, Ms. Ellis. You know that intent is everything. These aren't slips of language. They're glimpses into intent. They show a mind balancing law on one side and loyalty on the other. Ellis's breathing was shallow now, the microphone picking up each faint exhale. You could have stopped it, Crockett continued. You had the influence. You had the credibility. But you chose momentum over morality. And that's not just unprofessional. That's dangerous. Ellis finally spoke. Her voice was smaller than before. You're twisting everything I did into malice. I was trying to protect the system. Crockett looked at her. Then why? She said. Did the system need protection from you? The words hit with surgical precision. Not loud, not cruel, just precise enough to cut. And in that moment, the room shifted. The power balance flipped. Ellis wasn't the accuser anymore. She was the subject. The story. Crockett closed the folder. No further questions for now, she said quietly. But everyone in the room knew that wasn't the end. It was the warning before the storm. Jasmine Crockett didn't rush her next move. She knew better than to chase momentum. Power, she understood, isn't something you seize. It's something you let the other person hand to you when they start defending themselves. She waited until the murmur of papers and whispers in the gallery died down. Then she said it, calm, almost bored. Let's talk about coordination. Jenna Ellis blinked. Coordination? Yes, Crockett said. You testified that your work after the election was limited to public statements and procedural filings. That you weren't in contact with any campaign officials regarding strategy. Correct? That's correct, Ellis said, her voice steady again, too steady. She thought the danger had passed. Crockett nodded once. Then I want you to look at this chain. She lifted another file, thick with printed emails and message logs. This is a set of communications between yourself, senior campaign advisors, and legal consultants. Dated December 18th through January 2nd. Ellis's lips pressed together. Those may be privileged communications. They were, Crockett said evenly. Until your co-counsel voluntarily waived privilege in exchange for immunity. That sentence landed like a door slamming shut. Ellis's eyes flicked toward the committee chair, then to the audience, then back to Crockett. That's not admissible, she said quickly. This isn't a trial, Crockett replied. It's accountability. Crockett flipped the first page and read. Draft talking points for state electors meeting. Jenna, emphasize irregularities over outcomes. Avoid definitive claims. Focus on confusion. She looked up. That's your name in the header. J. Ellis, reviewed and approved. Ellis shifted in her seat. I don't recall reviewing that specific draft. Crockett nodded, as if expecting it. You don't recall a lot of things when paper starts talking. She turned another page. Push legislators to demand audits. Not because audits are needed, but because delay strengthens our leverage. Crockett's tone didn't change. Your initials appear next to that comment, Ms. Ellis. J. agreed. That's not my handwriting, Ellis said quickly. Crockett's expression didn't move. The forensic analyst disagrees. But let's set that aside. Let's talk about the call log attached to this thread. She held up another document. On December 21st, you joined a conference call with campaign advisors and White House staff. 2 hours later, a legal memo was circulated arguing that state legislatures could reclaim electors after certification. Your signature appears on that memo. Ellis's throat tightened. That memo was a draft. Crockett interrupted quietly. You keep saying that word, Miss Ellis. Draft. But every draft you wrote somehow turned into someone's justification for an illegal act. Ellis's silence was answer enough. Crockett leaned forward slightly. When lawyers put their names on ideas that they know can't survive in court, they stop being advocates, she said. They become architects of chaos. Congresswoman, Ellis said, her voice sharper now, you weren't there. You don't understand the environment. We were being told there were anomalies, irregularities. We were under orders to review everything. Orders, Crockett repeated. From whom? Ellis hesitated. From senior counsel. From campaign leadership. Names, Crockett said. Ellis froze. Crockett didn't push yet. She just stared, letting the silence pull the answer out like gravity. Finally, Ellis said, I was in communication with Rudy Giuliani and others. Others, Crockett said. Be specific. I'm not sure I should. Crockett opened a folder, cutting her off. That's fine, she said. I can help you remember. She placed a printout in front of her. On December 27th, your phone records show direct calls to Mr. Giuliani, Mr. Eastman, and a White House line registered to Mark Meadows. You discussed, and I quote, alternate certifications and messaging control. Does that refresh your memory? Ellis's voice faltered. I don't recall the details of that call. Crockett leaned back. It's strange, she said softly. You can recall every legal theory you've ever argued, but not the ones that cost this country peace. Ellis's lips parted, but no sound came out. Crockett continued, voice steady and surgical. You claim your role was procedural, but the evidence shows coordination. You claim you followed the law, but the record shows you helped bend it. You claim you were protecting democracy, but everything you did weakened its foundation. Ellis whispered, you're twisting my intentions. No, Crockett said. I'm reading your receipts. She turned to the last page. Here's your message to Mr. Giuliani. January 4th, 10:12 p.m. You wrote, if this doesn't work, I'm finished. But at least they'll remember who tried. Ellis stared at the page, color draining from her face. Tell me, Ms. Ellis, Crockett said quietly. When you wrote that, who did you mean by they? Ellis didn't answer. Your colleagues? Crockett asked. Your clients? Or the people who were already outside building gallows for those who disagreed with you? That last line didn't echo. It landed. Heavy. Final. For the first time that day, Jenna Ellis didn't look defiant. She looked small. Human. Crockett set the file aside and folded her hands. No further questions at this time, she said. But everyone watching, in that room, on every screen, across every time zone, knew she wasn't done. She had just set the stage for the line that would flip the hearing and end Jenna Ellis's defense for good. For nearly 20 seconds, Jasmine Crockett said nothing. Not a sound. Not a page turned. Just the low, humming silence of a hearing room that had run out of excuses to make for the powerful. Then she spoke. Ms. Ellis, she said, her tone low, almost tired. We've talked about coordination with campaign officials. But there's one more category you conveniently left out. Ellis blinked. I don't understand what you mean. Oh, I think you do, Crockett replied. Because your own emails show it. She lifted another document, this one thinner, but deadlier. Just a few pages. The kind that destroy entire careers. These are your communications with media surrogates, Crockett said, sliding the first page forward. Individuals who coordinated coverage to match your legal filings, even when the filings themselves were rejected by every court in the country. Ellis's jaw clenched. That's a gross exaggeration. I did media outreach like everyone else. Crockett cut her off gently. Let's not pretend, Ms. Ellis. This isn't outreach. This is orchestration. She read aloud. Draft for Fox appearance. Coordinate language with Jenna. Emphasize systemic breakdown, not fraud. Use same phrasing across all programs to maintain narrative cohesion. Crockett looked up. Your initials appear next to that edit. You even corrected the anchor's script. That's not unusual, Ellis said quickly. Lawyers often help clarify complex issues for the media. Crockett tilted her head. Complex issues, she said softly. You mean lies. That's not what I said. But it's what you did, Crockett replied. She turned another page. This next message was sent from your personal email, not your firm's. It reads, I know we've lost, but perception is still leverage. If we keep the coverage unified, the base won't notice for weeks. The gallery gasped, an audible wave of disbelief, rippling through reporters and staffers alike. Crockett continued calmly. You were manufacturing a story for the public you claimed to defend. You didn't lose the case, Ms. Ellis. You lost the truth. Ellis's voice cracked. You're taking a single email out of context. We were managing chaos. No, Crockett said evenly. You were monetizing it. Ellis's head snapped up. Excuse me. Crockett flipped the final page. Here's the wire record. A consulting payment of $92,500 to your private firm. Dated January 5th. Source, a media pack that ran targeted ads amplifying your claims. Ellis blinked hard, visibly fighting to keep her composure. That's a retainer. It was disclosed. Crockett's tone didn't waver. It was disclosed 3 months later, after the story broke, after the narrative collapsed, after your claims were publicly discredited. Ellis's hands fidgeted beneath the table, and then Crockett said it, that single, quiet line that flipped the entire room. Ms. Ellis, she said softly, you didn't defend the law. You rented it. The silence that followed was absolute. No coughs. No whispers. Even the camera operators seemed to stop breathing. Ellis opened her mouth, but nothing came out. For the first time that day, she looked like she wanted to disappear. Crockett leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but edged with something deeper, not anger, but moral exhaustion. You built a career arguing that truth mattered more than politics, she said. But when power came calling, you sold it for airtime and applause. You didn't just mislead the country, Ms. Ellis. You betrayed your own profession. Ellis's eyes glistened. That's not fair, she whispered. Crockett didn't move. Fair, she said, is what the truth gives you after you stop running from it. The room erupted in murmurs again, but this time, not against Crockett. The power had shifted entirely. Even those who'd come in ready to defend Ellis could feel it. The energy, the air, it all tilted toward Crockett. Chairman Jordan tried to gavel for order, but no one was listening. Every camera in the room was fixed on two faces, one calm, one unraveling. Crockett spoke one last time before yielding. "The law isn't a weapon, Ms. Ellis," she said quietly. "It's a mirror. And what you see in it right now, that's who you really are." Then she gathered her papers, folded her hands, and said, "Mr. Chairman, I yield back." But the hearing didn't feel like it ended. It felt like something else, a reckoning long overdue. And in living rooms across the country, millions of viewers sat in the same silence that filled that committee room, watching a woman who'd built her career on arguments run out of words entirely. The hearing adjourned, but the silence lingered long after the gavel fell. Jenna Ellis didn't move at first. She just stared at the table, eyes glassy, face frozen in the same practiced composure that had carried her through years of television appearances. But it was gone now. That perfect calm, the armor she'd worn through every interview, every courtroom, every speech, had cracked on live television. Crockett gathered her papers slowly, methodically. She wasn't gloating. She wasn't smiling. She simply moved with the quiet precision of someone who knew the job was done. Reporters erupted the second they were allowed to speak. "Congresswoman Crockett, did you plan that line? Do you believe Ms. Ellis committed perjury? Is this hearing now a criminal matter?" Crockett didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her silence was the story now. Across the table, Ellis fumbled with her microphone. "I'm done," she muttered. It wasn't loud, but it was picked up by every mic in the room. "I'm done with this." Then she stood abruptly, gathering her notes in a trembling hand. Aides tried to guide her toward the door, but the cameras followed. The once untouchable legal star, the confident face of post-election defense, was now walking out of the room, head down, chased by her own echo. Within minutes, the clip was everywhere. The line, "You didn't defend the law, you rented it," was trending across every platform. On CNN, Jake Tapper called it one of the most devastating moments ever caught in a congressional hearing. On MSNBC, Rachel Maddow simply replayed the exchange in full, then said, quietly, "That's accountability." Even Fox News struggled. One commentator said, "That didn't look good for her." Another muttered, "Crockett came prepared." By evening, the numbers were staggering. 30 million views in 4 hours. Hashtag rented the law, trending #1. The video had already become a cultural Rorschach test. Everyone saw what they wanted to see, but nobody could look away. Inside Ellis's camp, chaos. Her publicist canceled appearances. Her attorneys went dark. Her former allies began issuing statements distancing themselves from her. "I had no involvement with Ms. Ellis's media coordination," said one advisor. Another added, "She may have overstepped her professional boundaries." By nightfall, leaked messages confirmed what Crockett had hinted at, that Ellis had indeed coordinated with media figures to keep election denial narratives alive even after court defeats. The headlines wrote themselves. "The lawyer who sold the truth. From defense to disgrace." Crockett's calm ends an era of spin. Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett didn't give a single interview. When reporters caught her outside her office that night, she said only, "The facts spoke for themselves. I just read them aloud." That line, humble, quiet, made her even more powerful. Because while Ellis was unraveling under the bright lights, Crockett was turning restraint into dominance. By morning, the political impact had reached Washington. Law professors dissected the hearing like a chess match. "She used the Socratic method as a weapon," said one from Georgetown. "She let Ellis create her own collapse." The American Bar Association announced it would review professional conduct guidelines for attorneys involved in election-related cases. Behind closed doors, senior staffers whispered what everyone already knew. Crockett's questioning had shifted the public mood. For years, televised hearings had been noise, grandstanding, shouting, sound bites. But this was something else. Crockett hadn't raised her voice once. She hadn't insulted, mocked, or sneered. She had just dismantled Ellis's career one document at a time, until the only thing left was the sound of truth filling the vacuum. 3 days later, Ellis issued a public statement. Her tone was defensive, erratic, part apology, part self-justification. "I was doing my duty as a lawyer and as an American. she said. I refuse to be vilified for standing up for my beliefs. But it was too late. Her words didn't matter anymore, because the country had already seen what belief looked like when stripped of principle. The late-night shows picked it up next. Colbert replayed the "you rented it" line to audience gasps, then silence. Not laughter, silence. Because even the jokes couldn't touch it. The following Sunday, Meet the Press aired a roundtable on Crockett's rise. One commentator put it perfectly. She doesn't destroy people. She just removes the space where their excuses live. And that was the secret. Crockett never shouted. She didn't humiliate. She didn't need to. She used preparation, logic, and silence, the three tools that make arrogance implode. By the end of the week, Ellis's law license was under review. Her firm had dissolved. And Jasmine Crockett? She was still showing up to hearings, still quiet, still lethal. Her staff asked her once how she managed to stay so calm through every confrontation. Crockett smiled faintly and said, "When you walk in with the truth, you don't need to raise your voice. The truth raises itself." The clip of that comment went viral, too. Because in a country tired of shouting, the calmest voice in the room had just proven to be the most powerful. In Washington, stories burn fast. Scandals flare, outrage fades, and yesterday's headlines vanish by morning. But not this one. The Crockett-Ellis hearing didn't vanish. It echoed. For weeks, every law school, newsroom, and think tank dissected that 47-minute exchange. Not because of how loud it was, but because of how quiet it became. It was proof that truth, when delivered without ego, cuts sharper than any insult ever could. Professors played the clip in ethics lectures. Students watched Jasmine Crockett's calm gaze and the measured precision of her questions. This, one professor said, pausing the frame where Ellis's eyes dropped to the table, is the anatomy of accountability. Even veteran attorneys, the same ones who once dismissed her as too idealistic, admitted privately that she had done something extraordinary. She didn't destroy Ellis, one said on background. She made Ellis see herself. That, more than anything, terrified Washington. Because for the first time in years, a politician had stripped away the theater and left only the evidence. No spin, no slogan, just the sound of silence after the truth lands. Within months, committees across Congress quietly began adopting what they called the Crockett method. It wasn't formalized or written down, but everyone knew what it meant. Lead with documents, not accusations. Let the subject deny first. Wait, then show the proof. Don't shout. Don't gloat. Just let silence work. That strategy changed everything. Hearings that once felt like stage performances now became methodical cross-examinations. Even opponents respected it. As one conservative strategist said on air, "I don't agree with her politics, but you can't argue with her precision. She doesn't grandstand. She prosecutes." And Jenna Ellis? Her decline was slow, public, and merciless. She tried to rebuild her image through interviews, podcasts, sympathetic audiences, but it never landed. Every time she spoke, the internet flooded with that one line. You didn't defend the law. You rented it. Her speaking engagements evaporated. Her law license was suspended pending review. And when the ethics board published its report 6 months later, it quoted Crockett directly. "The law is not a weapon. It's a mirror. Those who distort it for power lose both." That sentence became a headline again. Crockett didn't react. She never gloated, never commented. Her aides later said she read the report quietly in her office, then went back to drafting legislation. But outside, the moment was seismic. Every network revisited the hearing on its 1-year anniversary. Some called it the turning point hearing. Others simply labeled it the day silence won. Clips resurfaced of Crockett's steady gaze, her even tone, the quiet authority of her questions. And they stood in stark contrast to Ellis's frantic denials, the fidgeting, the deflections, the slow unraveling of a person who had run out of versions of the truth. It became a symbol, not just of accountability, but of control, a reminder that composure is the most disarming form of strength. When a journalist asked Crockett how she felt knowing her exchange had become the most replayed hearing moment in congressional history, she smiled faintly and said, "I wasn't trying to make history. I was just trying to make honesty normal again. That line, make honesty normal again, became a political mantra, printed on signs, shared on social media, quoted by both parties. Months later, when she was invited to speak at the National Press Club, the room was packed. She spoke for 22 minutes. No notes. No theatrics. And she ended with words that would later be engraved outside the House committee hearing room, where she'd faced Jenna Ellis. Power doesn't protect truth. Truth protects power, when you have the courage to stand behind it. The crowd stood in silence. Then the applause began. As for Jenna Ellis, her name faded from the news cycle the way all scandals eventually do. But that clip, that moment when Jasmine Crockett leaned forward and said, "You didn't defend the law. You rented it," never disappeared. It remained online, in documentaries, in lectures, in the collective memory of a country that had forgotten what sincerity under pressure looked like. And long after the noise of politics moved on, people would still find that clip and replay it. Because it wasn't just a takedown. It was a reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing you can say in the face of lies is the truth, spoken calmly, by someone who's not afraid to say it.